Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. The main event here, and today we're going to be talking about the things I believe that everyone should be considering going into Regulation I, which was just recently announced a few days ago. Basically, the format that allows it to use 2 box cover legendary Pokemon, aka restricted Pokemon for short. Before we get started, make sure you click like for your boy and subscribe if you're new, and we're gonna go ahead and get right into it. So the first thing, and kind of the most obvious, I just want to get it out the way, is that the restrictors that were strong in Reg G, like these strongest ones, aka Shadow Rider, Ice Rider, Zamazenta, and Miraidon, they're the ones they're always competing for like the top spot basically in Regulation G. They all get better, right? So they're not going to be going away anywhere. So if that's something that you're hoping for, I think you got to get it out of your head now. The reason they all get stronger is because whereas these Pokemon before were the sole focal point of a team, which means if you were struggling with that matchup, you could patch it pretty easily by just adding certain things that's countered them specifically. You can no longer just do that straight up. We'll actually get more into that later in one of the other points. Whereas these partners will cover some of their holes, cover some of their weaknesses as well. And not to mention, they get stronger just by the nature of being able to add another strong Pokemon to the team. Usually the restrictors are by themselves with 5 normal Pokemon, maybe 2 of them being support, and then 2 of them being like some other offensive pieces, or maybe 3 supports to maybe 3 supports to one other offensive piece. These guys will be able to partner up in ways that provide coverage. That means that you can change the way you run these a little bit, because you don't have to get all of your coverage in one Pokemon, because these Pokemon are not the sole focal point of your team anymore. Like for example, Calyrex Shadow Rider always runs its 2 stabs, Astral Barrage, and some form of a psychic attack, right? Let's just say psychic. Usually protect, and then it runs another move here. Sometimes it's puff, sometimes it's something else, right? This 3rd slot, by nature of it having a partner, like say it has Pollen Puff because you struggle hitting dark types. If you have a partner that hits dark types, you can remove that and add something else if you want, like Taunt, or something that I've been experimenting with, or Encore. Does it give any healing? Or Heal Pulse, right? Like you have options here. So it increases the flexibility of what you can do with these guys. And when you take Pokemon that are this strong and above everything else and give them more flexibility, there's no choice that they have other than to just simply get better. But yeah, like I said, that was the first and most obvious one that I want to get through. So I want to move on to the next point really quickly. So this also ties into the first point. So basically your cookie cutter one size fits all defensive strategies that you used in the previous regulation are not going to work as effectively anymore. For example, Incineroar here, Terraghost Wisp was one of its biggest and easiest ways to get around Zamazenta, right? Because it would come in, it would like intimidate the POW to be -1 anyway, so it could take a throat chop and then it could wisp whoever it wanted. It wouldn't take that much damage from like a from Heavy Slam and Behemoth Bash. So you could Terraghost Wisp and you'd get like a free burn as long as you landed the Wisp no matter what, right? So this is very, very free into Zamazenta. Terraghost loses a lot of value in Incin if Zamazenta is paired with a ghost type like Calyrex, Shadow Rider, for example, right? So you have to innovate your defensive strategy. If you have a bad Zaman matchup, you can't just throw a bunch of Terraghost on there if it's running with a ghost type. It could be running with other restrictions, but I'm just looking at what common pairings will most likely be. So you can't just do this and say, okay, my Zaman matchup is patched now, because you will struggle Terraghosting in front of a Calyrex Shadow Rider. And speaking of Calyrex Shadow Rider, usually the patch for that for most people was just throwing a bunch of dark types on the team. So Urshidark, Champao, Grimmsnarl, King Gambit if that's your flavor. But again, if that's paired with the Zam, then these become much, much harder to use to counter that, right? Like Champao is pretty bad into Zamazenta overall. Urshidark is all right if you can get it to Terra, but otherwise it's like it resists the dark type because the fighting type. So like they both get hit for super effective body press, right? And if you try to Terra Ghost your POW, it'll just take a lot of damage from Astral Barrage anyway. And then if you Terra this into something like Poison, it gets hit by Psychic, right? So like you have to really, really, really up your defensive game. Even like if you go a little bit lower, Rillaboom and Raging Bolt. Rillaboom and Raging Bolt were 2 of like the biggest counters to like Miraidon teams. But like one of the common pairings you obviously hear about is like Miraidon and Calyrex Ice. Calyrex Ice beats both of these Pokemon, right? So you have to find ways to make these things work against that. Like maybe you Terrafire your Rillaboom, for example, because you don't want to just die to Glacial Lance. But the issue is that when you Terrafire the Rillaboom, If you get caught out of terrain, drift will kill it, right? So you have to consider that. Raging Bolt would usually be able to deal with it with like an assault vest and maybe something like Terra, like Fairy, to try to call out what's going to happen. Or like you don't run the assault vest and you run like a what's it called, you just run like you just run Protect on there, see what they lock into, and then you decide whether or not you want to Terra Fairy or not. But the issue with that now is that they can like click drift into you very free, because if you don't Terra to like keep the, if you don't Terra to keep, or they can Volt Switch, I should say, into you very free, because if you don't terrestrialize, you're still a dragon type, now you're weak to ice, right? Or like maybe Miraidon's pure the Groudon now, and now you're weak to ground. So like you have to just consider all those things, right? So you those cookie cutter defense strategies will no longer work as effectively. I won't say they won't work at all. You can still use them, but you have to find ways to innovate them to keep up with what's going to be changing. So the third thing I want to get into is that your terrestrialization now becomes a much more scarce resource than it was before. In Regulation G, because you're so restricted with the focal point of the team, everything was built to support it. You pretty much always terrestrialized your restricted mon, right? Because it was just kind of the thing you had to do. And it was okay because it was the most powerful Pokemon on your team, and it kind of just it kind of was your win kind of most situations. In this format, because you'll have two, because they have their own weaknesses that they need to deal with, your terrestrialization becomes a much more scarce resource. And we'll use like these three because these are three of like the biggest Terra Hogs like out there. So for example, your Koraidon always wants to Terra Fire. Let's say your Koraidon is paired with your Shadow Rider and you're facing down a Fluttermane, right? Fluttermane has Shadow Ball, Fluttermane has Fairy Move. Fluttermane Shadow Ball will kill this in one shot, Fluttermane's Fairy Move will kill this in one shot. So now you have to make a decision. Do you save your terrestrialization for the Calyrex Shadow to get off the to go like Terra Water to get off the weakness, or do you pop your Terra Fire? Especially if the Fluttermane is not like Choice Specs, for example, right? Then you have to, if the Fluttermane is not like Choice Specs, for example, then you have to, make that call. Same for your Zamazenta. Zamazenta doesn't like getting hit with fire type moves, especially on the special side, because it doesn't get a +1 speed def boost because of a +1 defense boost. So things like Chi-Yu Overheat can still kill this. Landorus clicking Earth Power can still kill this. Even like Surging Strikes and Rain can deal with this, which is why this thing like that usually commonly tears into like Dragon, because it resists fire and water. And it also like resists electricity, and you're kind of neutral. You're not neutral. You resist Dragon as it stands, and you can kind of beat Fairy types with this guy pretty easily before you Terra Dragon as well. But now what happens if you have a partner who also needs to Terra for something as well, right? Now you can't just pop this very freely on turn one without considering the ramifications much more, because again, you are now sharing that terrestrialization with someone else. So I'll even use the Fluttermane example. No, Fluttermane doesn't work so as much. So like Chi-Yu is the example I would use for these two, right? You're facing down a Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu can click Heat Wave, it can click Overheat, or it can click like Snarl, or it can click Dark Pulse, most likely, right? Those are most likely the moves you find on Chi-Yu. Overheat will kill your Zom, Dark Pulse will kill your Calyrex Shadow. Like no questions asked, it'll kill both of them. If you pop your Terra Dragon and they hit you with the Dark Pulse, then you lost this Pokemon. Maybe you trade and get the Chi-Yu, but trading Chi-Yu for Calyrex Shadow was a losing trade, right? You lose your Calyrex Shadow, you lost that trade. On the flip side, if they overheat your Zom, and they kill the Zom, and you leave Chi-Yu alive, Calyrex Shadow doesn't really deal with Chi-Yu very well anyway, right? So now you have a Pokemon that now you have a Pokemon that doesn't really deal with Chi-Yu very well, even if it does Terra. So you have to make those decisions like on the fly, or at least in your team builder, you have to make those decisions when you're game planning. So that's something that I really, really want people to like consider going into it, especially if you're like a player who's not experienced in double restricted formats. The next thing I want to get into is, and when I say this, don't take this as these Pokemon being bad. It's actually the exact opposite. It's more about usage. So Pokemon that were basically like tier 2 in Reg G, like Koraidon, Kyogre, Lunala, Zacian, for example, Pokemon that never really hit the usage numbers that the top 4 ever did, Calyrex, Miraidon, and Zamazenta. These guys never hit that peak usage like those guys did. They never even came close to those guys' usage, right? But these Pokemon may as well be tier 1 in double restricted formats, because now that they don't have to be the sole part of your team, like Like obviously Kyogre reached some of the heights with like finals and stuff like that, but you guys get what I'm saying. But now these Pokemon aren't the only focus of the team, just by the nature of their roles being so compressed, because they have a overpowered partner as well. They can do what they do best, and they basically become like tier 1 mons, because they'll always be paired with something probably stronger than them for the most part, with the exception of Kyogre and Zacian, which might be paired together. But that kind of still makes them both feel very tier 1 in my opinion. But yeah, these guys can just kind of focus down on their roles, which is like covering the weaknesses of their big brother, right? So like we mentioned with Koraidon, Cali Shadow, just get rid of the dark types for us, right? Get rid of the Rillaboom with the AV, right? Handle that for us. Lunala is a Pokemon that like also struggles with like the dark type. So maybe this is with maybe this is paired with Zamazenta, right? So Zamazenta, you cover that for me. Hey, you know, if you're dealing with like she used Heat Wave, I can block that for you, right? So like they kind of become much better Pokemon than they were before. And obviously like Lunala won a tournament and stuff like that. I think Zacian won some of those tours, but there was way much less of these than there was the top guys, and now these guys are going to become way better. Even like Kyogre, who had some finals with like the Combine Origin Pulse stuff, I think this thing can just kind of click Water Spout very freely. Like a Choice Scarf set is very free for this thing right now, because it would struggle with like Pokemon, what's it called? It would struggle like with stuff like Miraidon, for example. But like Pokemon like Zacian makes your Kyogre feel much stronger because it covers that for you, right? It's like this thing can kind of hold the Miraidon in place, like Kyogre takes care of all his partners. And then like on the flip side, the fire types that your other Pokemon might struggle with, like your Cali Ice might struggle with fire types, your Zacian might struggle with fire types, Kyogre can handle that for it, right? So these Pokemon become much more improved. And they're things that you have to consider in your team builder when you're building your team. It's no more of like, hey, what's your Cali Shadow matchup? It's what's your Cali Shadow Koraidon matchup, right? It's no more, hey, what's your Miraidon matchup? It's what's your Miraidon, you know, Lunala matchup, or just throwing things at the wall, obviously. But like, you have to consider that there's going to be two of these on the other side. That section was a little bit more convoluted than I wanted it to be, but I think you guys understand exactly what I'm talking about. So that's 4 out of the 5 things I wanted to go over. Before I get into the last thing, I just want to say thank you guys for, you know, being here. Don't forget to click like, favorite, and subscribe if you're new. Become a member if you're so inclined. If you want to still send me Reg G teams, if you become a member, then I will take a look at those teams and I will send them back to you, the Poke Paste, and I'll try to improve them. If you want to send me Reg I teams ahead of time, feel free to send me those. If you are currently a member and want to send me a team, if you know you've already sent me one, send me another. Like I'm down to go over it again, because you guys are the best and the realest. But yeah, otherwise, thank you guys for being here. And the final step I want to leave you with is,
oh brother, this guy stinks.
see you guys in the next video. Peace.